The cement mixer fired up at 7 in the morning, and within 3 minutes, Susan Carmichael stood at my property line with her phone out, already recording me like I was committing a felony. I am Tyler Richardson, and I have been running Richardson Concrete Company for 15 years in Phoenix, Arizona. My family has been in the concrete business since 1962, when my grandfather started pouring foundations for the suburban boom that transformed the desert into neighborhoods. The mixer on my property is not some hobby. It is how I feed my family and employ 12 people who depend on me showing up to job sites with functional equipment. Susan lived 3 houses down in the Cedar Grove Estates development, a collection of 200 cookie-cutter homes that sprouted up between 2010 and 2012. She wore her blonde hair in that specific style that screams HOA president, the kind with too much volume and highlights that cost more than my monthly insurance payment. Her yoga pants probably cost $80, and she clutched her phone with manicured nails painted the color of dried blood. "Excuse me," she called out, her voice dripping with false politeness. "Are you aware that commercial equipment is explicitly prohibited in residential zones according to Cedar Grove HOA bylaws?" I wiped concrete dust off my hands with a rag and walked over to the fence line. My property sat on 2 acres purchased by my grandfather in 1965, long before anyone thought about building subdivisions out here. The deed sat in my safe, yellowed with age but crystal clear in its terms. I owned this land outright, and no HOA ruled over my decisions. "Morning, Susan. I am aware of your HOA bylaws. They do not apply to me since I am not part of your HOA," I said, keeping my tone even. Her expression shifted from fake pleasant to genuinely annoyed in half a second. "Your property is adjacent to Cedar Grove Estates. The noise and disruption affect our property values. I will be filing a formal complaint." "You do what you need to do," I replied and walked back to my mixer. The machine roared back to life, drowning out whatever else she shouted at me. I had a job in Scottsdale that afternoon, pouring a foundation for a new restaurant, and I needed to prep my equipment. The mixer spun, blending cement, water, and aggregate into the perfect consistency. This machine represented decades of my family's expertise, and some HOA busybody would not intimidate me into silence. That evening, my wife Emma came home from her nursing shift at Phoenix General and found me in the garage, maintaining my equipment. She leaned against the door frame, still in her scrubs, exhaustion evident in her posture. "How was your day?" she asked. "Had a visit from the HOA president, Susan Carmichael." "She threatened to file complaints about the mixer," I said, not looking up from the maintenance checklist I was running through. Emma sighed. "Tyler, we have been through this before. Can we not have another conflict with neighbors? The last dispute took 2 years to resolve. That was different. That was about the property line with the Johnsons, and we were right. The survey proved it. This is about my business, which has existed longer than their entire development." "I am not backing down," I said. She walked over and put her hand on my shoulder. "I know you are right. I just worry about the stress. You work 14-hour days already." I turned and kissed her forehead. "It will be fine. She can file all the complaints she wants. I have the law on my side." 2 days later, a certified letter arrived from the Cedar Grove Estates HOA. The return address listed Susan Carmichael as president, with Linda Pemberton as vice president and Patricia Morgan as treasurer. The letter contained 4 pages of single-spaced text outlining violations, potential fines, and demands that I cease all commercial activity on my property within 30 days. I called my attorney, David Chen, who had handled my business legal matters for 8 years. His office sat in downtown Phoenix, in one of those mid-rise buildings with tinted windows that reflected the brutal desert sun. "Tyler, good to hear from you. What is going on?" David answered on the second ring. I explained the situation, reading portions of the HOA letter aloud. David listened without interrupting, which I appreciated about him. He processed information before reacting. "Okay, here is the situation. Your property predates their development by decades. You are not part of their HOA, you never signed any covenant agreements, and your business operates legally under city and county ordinances. They have no authority over you whatsoever. However, they might try to pursue nuisance claims or noise ordinances. Are you operating within permitted hours?" David asked, "Always. I start at 7, stop by 6 on weekdays, and I do not work weekends unless it is an emergency." "Everything is permitted and licensed," I said. "Good. Send me that letter. I will draft a response." "This should be straightforward, but HOAs can be persistent when they think they have power," David said. I scanned the letter and emailed it to him within the hour. His response arrived the next afternoon, a beautifully crafted legal letter that essentially told Susan and her HOA to pound sand in the most professional language possible. It outlined my property rights, the historical precedents of my business, and a subtle warning about harassment. David sent the letter via certified mail and email. I thought that would end it. I was wrong. Susan escalated. She organized a petition among Cedar Grove residents, collecting signatures demanding that the city revoke my business license. She showed up at city council meetings, armed with printed photos of my mixer and trucks, claiming they destroyed the neighborhood's character. She posted on neighborhood Facebook groups, painting me as some kind of industrial villain ruining suburban tranquility. What Susan did not know, what nobody except my family and a few old-timers knew, was that Richardson Concrete had poured the foundation and infrastructure for every single building in Cedar Grove Estates. In 2009, when the development company started construction, they contracted my father to handle all concrete work. He supervised the pouring of every foundation slab, every sidewalk, every driveway, and every decorative pathway. Our company's work literally held up their entire community. The development company, Sunset Properties LLC, had gone bankrupt in 2014 after overextending during the housing recovery. Their assets were liquidated, their records scattered, but my father kept meticulous documentation. Every job, every pour, every inspection report sat in filing cabinets in our office. He taught me that documentation saves businesses, and he was right. Susan's petition gained traction. She collected 143 signatures from Cedar Grove residents. She submitted formal complaints to the city's Code Enforcement Division, the Planning Department, and even tried to involve the County Health Department, claiming concrete dust posed health hazards. I spent hours responding to inspections. Code enforcement showed up twice, finding nothing wrong. My equipment was stored properly, operated during legal hours, and my business license was current. The inspector, a tired-looking man named George who had worked for the city for 20 years, actually apologized after the second visit. "Sorry about this, Tyler. Your operation is cleaner than most. Someone is really pushing hard for us to find something," George said, making notes on his tablet. "I know who it is. Susan Carmichael from the HOA. She wants me gone because my mixer is too loud or too ugly or whatever excuse fits her narrative today," I said. George shook his head. "HOA. I have seen them try to dictate what color people paint their mailboxes. They forget property rights exist. You keep doing what you are doing. Everything here is compliant." But Susan did not stop. She contacted my clients, somehow obtaining my business information and sending emails warning them about supposed violations and legal troubles. I lost 2 jobs because clients did not want to deal with potential complications. That crossed the line from annoyance to actively damaging my livelihood. I called David again. She is interfering with my business. I have emails from clients who canceled because of her campaign. What can we do? David's tone turned serious. That is tortious interference. We can pursue civil action. Start documenting everything. Save every email, every social media post, every piece of communication. If she is actively contacting your clients with false information, we have grounds for a lawsuit. I do not want a lawsuit. I want her to leave me alone so I can work, I said, frustration bleeding into my voice. I understand. Let me send another letter, more forceful this time. Sometimes people need to understand there are consequences, David said. The second letter went out, explicitly warning Susan about tortious interference and potential legal action. It demanded she cease all contact with my clients and retract false statements. David copied the entire HOA board on the correspondence. That evening my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost did not answer, but something made me pick up. Is this Tyler Richardson? A man's voice, older, with a slight southwestern drawl, speaking. Who is this? My name is Robert Hernandez. I was the project manager for Sunset Properties when we developed Cedar Grove Estates. I heard through the grapevine that Susan Carmichael is causing you trouble. I wanted to reach out, he said. I sat up straighter. Yes, sir, she has been making my life difficult for weeks now. What can I do for you? Actually, I think I can do something for you. I remember your father worked with him on the Cedar Grove project. Hell of a concrete man. The work Richardson Concrete did on that development was top-notch. I kept copies of all our project files when Sunset went under. Documentation, contracts, payment records, all of it. If you need ammunition to deal with that HOA, I might have exactly what you are looking for, Robert said. We arranged to meet the next day at a coffee shop in Temp. Robert showed up with 3 accordion files stuffed with documents. He was in his late 60s, weathered skin that spoke of decades in Arizona sun, wearing a denim shirt and boots that had seen real work. Your father saved our project multiple times. When other contractors cut corners, he refused to compromise. These foundations were poured right, which is why none of those homes have settling issues like other developments from that era. I owe your family, Robert said, pushing the files across the table. I opened the first folder. Inside were contracts, blueprints, inspection reports, and payment ledgers. Every single document bore Richardson Concrete's name. My father's signature appeared on dozens of pages, certifying work completion and quality standards. This is comprehensive. What made you keep all this? I asked. Robert sipped his coffee. I saw the writing on the wall when Sunset started having financial trouble. The owners made bad decisions, over-leveraged everything. I grabbed copies of critical files before the bankruptcy, figured they might be useful someday. Never thought it would be to help fight an HOA, though. We spent an hour going through documents. Robert explained the scope of work, the timeline, the challenges. Cedar Grove Estates sat on difficult ground, requiring extensive soil preparation and specialized foundation work. My father had handled it all, ensuring every building met or exceeded code requirements. One more thing, Robert said, pulling out a specific document. The master deed for the development includes an easement and services agreement. Sunset Properties contracted with Richardson Concrete for ongoing maintenance and inspection of the concrete infrastructure. The agreement runs with the land. Technically, Your company has permanent access rights to every foundation, sidewalk, and concrete structure in Cedar Grove for inspection and maintenance purposes. I stared at the document. This is still valid, unless someone officially terminated it, yes. And I know it was not terminated because I wrote it specifically to be nearly impossible to terminate. Your father gave us favorable rates in exchange for the long-term maintenance contract. Made sense for both sides, Robert explained. This changed everything. I made copies of everything, thanked Robert profusely, and headed straight to David's office. David spent 30 minutes reviewing documents before he looked up with something resembling a smile. Tyler, this is incredible. You have not just a defense, you have leverage. If the HOA continues harassing you, you can exercise these access rights. Every homeowner in Cedar Grove signed deeds that include this services agreement. They might not even know it exists. What does that mean practically? I asked. It means you have legal right to access their properties for inspection and maintenance of concrete structures. It means their development depends on agreements made with your company. It means Susan Carmichael picked a fight with the one person who has documented contractual connections to every property in her precious HOA, David said. We drafted a new letter, this time including references to the services agreement and access rights. David suggested a strategic approach rather than going nuclear immediately. We would remind the HOA of the existing relationship between Richardson Concrete and their development, offer to discuss the matter reasonably, but make clear that continued harassment would result in both civil action and potential exercise of contractual rights in ways they would find inconvenient. The letter went out on Friday. By Monday morning, my phone started ringing. The first call came from Patricia Morgan, the HOA treasurer. Her voice shook slightly. Mr. Richardson, I received a letter from your attorney. I was not aware of the history between your company and our development. Susan has been handling this matter, and I think there may have been miscommunication. Miscommunication implies innocent misunderstanding. Your HOA president has been harassing me, interfering with my business, and attempting to destroy my livelihood. That goes beyond miscommunication, I said. You are right. I am sorry. Some board members are concerned about how Susan has handled this. We would like to meet with you to discuss a resolution. Would you be willing? Patricia asked. I will meet with the full board with my attorney present at a neutral location. I am willing to listen, but the harassment stops immediately, I said. We scheduled a meeting for Wednesday evening at the Cedar Grove Community Center, a bland building near the development's main entrance. David accompanied me, carrying a briefcase full of documentation. The HOA board sat on one side of a folding table. Susan in the center, flanked by Patricia, Linda Pemberton, and two other board members I had not encountered before, Mark Sullivan and Jennifer Torres. Susan's expression radiated hostility, but the others looked uncomfortable. David started. Thank you for agreeing to this meeting. Let me establish facts. Tyler Richardson owns property predating your development. He is not subject to your HOA authority. His business operates legally under all applicable regulations. Your campaign of harassment, including interference with his client relationships, constitutes tortious interference and potentially defamation. Are we clear so far? Susan opened her mouth, but Patricia touched her arm. We understand. Some of us were not aware of the full situation. David continued. Additionally, Richardson Concrete poured all infrastructure for Cedar Grove Estates and holds a perpetual services agreement granting access and inspection rights for all concrete structures in this development. That agreement runs with the deeds to your properties. That is absurd. I never agreed to any such thing, Susan said, her voice rising. David slid a document across the table. This is the master deed for Cedar Grove Estates. Section 12, subsection 4. Every property owner here signed a deed incorporating this agreement. It is legally binding. Mark Sullivan, a man in his 50s wearing glasses and a golf shirt, picked up the document and read carefully. This is in my deed. How did I not know this? Most people do not read the full deed documentation. Title companies often summarize. But the agreement exists and remains valid, David explained. Jennifer Torres leaned forward. What exactly does this agreement allow? It grants Richardson concrete access to inspect and maintain concrete infrastructure, including foundations, at reasonable times with appropriate notice. It was designed to ensure long-term structural integrity. Tyler has never exercised these rights because there has been no need. However, continued harassment might change that calculation, David said. The implication hung in the air. I could legally demand access to inspect foundations, sidewalks, driveways. I could require homeowners to allow me onto their properties. It would be disruptive, annoying, and completely legal. Susan's face flushed red. This is blackmail. No, this is contract law. Your HOA declared war on Tyler's business. We are simply clarifying the full scope of the relationship between Richardson Concrete and your community. Tyler wants to be left alone to run his legitimate business. If that happens, life continues as normal. If harassment continues, he will exercise his contractual rights, and he will pursue civil action for damages already incurred, David said calmly. Patricia looked at Susan. You told us he was just some contractor with loud equipment. You did not mention any of this history. I did not know, Susan muttered. You did not bother to find out. You assumed you could bully him because you are HOA president. You cost this man business, damaged his reputation, and wasted all our time, Patricia said, anger creeping into her voice. The meeting devolved into internal HOA arguments. Susan insisted she acted appropriately, while other board members expressed frustration with her methods. After 20 minutes of increasingly heated discussion, Linda Pemberton called for order. Here is what I propose. The HOA officially withdraws all complaints against Mr. Richardson. We issue a statement clarifying that his business operates legally and independently of our community. Susan drafts a personal apology for any interference with his client relationships. In exchange, Mr. Richardson agrees not to pursue legal action and continues operating his business normally without exercising the inspection access rights unless genuinely necessary. Does that work? Linda said. David looked at me. I considered the offer. My goal was never revenge, just peace to do my work. I want the apology in writing. I want the HOA statement distributed to every resident who signed the petition. And I want assurance this board will not pursue any further action against me or my business. Patricia nodded. Agreed, Susan. Susan stared at the table, her jaw clenched. Fine. Not fine. I need to hear you agree explicitly, I said. She looked up, meeting my eyes. I agree to the terms. I will write the apology. We formalized the agreement in writing before leaving that evening. David drafted a simple settlement document. Everyone signed, and I walked out feeling like I could finally breathe normally again. The HOA statement went out the next day via email to all residents. It explained that my property was independent, my business was legal, and previous concerns were based on misunderstandings. Susan's personal apology arrived 2 days later, a stiff formal letter that barely qualified as an apology but met the technical requirements. I thought everything was resolved. I was wrong again. 3 weeks later, Emma came home from work with concerning news. Her coworker, Janet, lived in Cedar Grove Estates. Janet mentioned that Susan was trying to organize residents to pressure the city council into rezoning the area, which would potentially force my property into commercial zoning with different tax rates and regulations. Janet thought you should know. She said Susan is being quiet about it, working behind the scenes instead of making public noise, Emma said. I felt my blood pressure rise. She agreed to stop. We had a signed settlement. Emma touched my arm. I know, but maybe talk to David before doing anything. Do not give her ammunition. She was right. I called David the next morning and explained the situation. He listened, then sighed audibly. Technically, advocating for rezoning is not a violation of the settlement if she is doing it through proper municipal channels without specifically targeting you. However, if she is organizing this specifically to harm your business, it could be argued as continued harassment. We need evidence of her intent, David said. How do I get that? I asked. Do you know anyone in Cedar Grove who might attend HOA meetings or community gatherings where she is discussing this? He asked. I did not, but Emma did. Janet agreed to pay attention and report back. Over the next 2 weeks, she attended 2 HOA meetings and 1 neighborhood gathering at her resident's home. Susan was indeed pushing for rezoning, specifically framing it as protecting residential character and property values. She avoided mentioning my name directly, but made pointed references to commercial activity incompatible with suburban neighborhoods. Janet recorded portions of a meeting on her phone, where Susan stated, "We need to ensure this community remains residential." Certain adjacent properties threaten that vision. The City Council needs to hear unified voices demanding appropriate zoning protections. The intent was clear even without naming me explicitly. David reviewed the recording and confirmed we had grounds to claim settlement violation. However, he suggested a different approach. Instead of fighting the rezoning effort, why not show up to the City Council meeting and present your case? Your business is established, grandfathered under existing regulations, and provides jobs. You have community support from clients and employees. Make Susan's effort backfire by demonstrating exactly why your business deserves protection, David suggested. The City Council meeting was scheduled for 3 weeks out. I spent that time preparing. I contacted current and former clients, collected testimonials about Richardson Concrete's work quality and reliability. I gathered employment records showing local jobs created. I compiled documentation of community projects we handled at reduced rates, including work for churches, schools, and nonprofit organizations. My employees agreed to attend the meeting as a show of support. Emma took the night off from the hospital. Even Robert Hernandez agreed to speak about the quality of work Richardson Concrete provided during the Cedar Grove development. The meeting took place on a Tuesday evening at Phoenix City Hall. The council chamber was a large room with tiered seating, a raised platform for council members, and a podium for public comment. About 40 people attended, including a noticeable contingent from Cedar Grove Estates, led by Susan. The rezoning proposal appeared as item 7 on the agenda. When it came up, the council president, a woman named Councilor Deborah Martinez, summarized the request. Susan had submitted a formal petition signed by 170 residents requesting the area around Cedar Grove Estates be evaluated for residential zoning enforcement. Susan spoke first during public comment. She presented her case calmly, emphasizing property values, residential character, and quality of life concerns. She showed photos of my property, my mixer, my trucks. She described noise and disruption, carefully avoiding anything that could be proven false, but painting a picture of industrial encroachment on suburban peace. Then it was my turn. I approached the podium with note cards, though I barely needed them. I had lived this situation for months. Good evening. My name is Tyler Richardson. I own Richardson Concrete Company, the business Susan Carmichael would like you to regulate out of existence. My grandfather started this company in 1962. For 3 generations, we have provided quality concrete services to Phoenix and surrounding communities. We employ 12 people, all local residents. We pay taxes, follow regulations, and contribute to this city's growth, I started. I explained the history, the property ownership predating Cedar Grove estates by decades. I described our role in actually building the development that now wanted to exclude us. I presented testimonials from clients, letters from employees, documentation of community service projects. This is not about noise or disruption. My business operates within legal hours, meets all code requirements, and has passed multiple inspections. This is about an HOA president who dislikes having a working business near her development and has decided to weaponize city government to achieve what she could not accomplish through harassment, I said. Robert Hernandez spoke next, describing the Cedar Grove project and Richardson Concrete's critical role. He brought credibility as a neutral third party with extensive development experience. Several of my employees spoke briefly, sharing how important their jobs were and how Richardson Concrete treated them fairly. One employee, Marcus, who had worked for me for 8 years, got emotional describing how I helped him when his daughter was sick, covering insurance gaps and giving him flexible hours. Then something unexpected happened. Other business owners from the area spoke up. A woman who ran a landscaping company described similar HOA harassment she faced. A man who operated a plumbing business talked about attempts to restrict his work trucks. They positioned my situation as part of a broader problem of HOAs overreaching their authority and trying to control property beyond their jurisdiction. The council members asked questions, mostly directed at Susan. Councilor Martinez focused on jurisdiction. Miss Carmichael, Mr. Richardson's property is not part of Cedar Grove Estates HOA, correct? She asked. Correct, but his activities affect our community, Susan replied. Has the city received complaints about his business from anyone other than Cedar Grove residents? Councilor Martinez asked. Susan hesitated. I do not know. Because the answer is no. Code enforcement reports show multiple inspections of Richardson Concrete, all finding full compliance. No violations, no legitimate complaints. This appears to be a dispute between you and a neighboring property owner, not a zoning issue requiring city council intervention, Councilor Martinez said. Another council member, George Reeves, added, I am concerned about using rezoning as a weapon in neighborhood disputes. Mr. Richardson's business predates the development in question. His property has historical precedents. Changing zoning to target a specific business sets a troubling precedent. The council deliberated for 15 minutes before voting. The rezoning proposal was rejected 5-2, with only 2 members supporting further evaluation. Councilor Martinez added a statement to the record, noting that established businesses with clean compliance records deserve protection from neighbor disputes, disguised as zoning concerns. I felt relief wash over me. Emma squeezed my hand. My employees grinned and patted my shoulders. We left City Hall feeling victorious, but Susan was not finished yet. Her obsession with controlling the situation had morphed into something darker. 2 days after the council meeting, I arrived at my property to find someone had vandalized my cement mixer. Deep scratches covered the drum, paint stripper had been poured on the control panel, and someone had tried to damage the motor housing. The destruction was extensive, thousands of dollars in repairs. I called the police immediately. A Phoenix police officer named Detective Raymond Wilson responded, a middle-aged man with a no-nonsense demeanor. He documented everything, took photos, and asked questions about potential suspects. "Have you had disputes with anyone recently? Anyone who might want to damage your equipment?" he asked. I explained the entire situation with Susan and the HOA. Detective Wilson's expression shifted from routine inquiry to genuine interest. "You have documentation of these disputes?" he asked. "Extensive documentation. Letters, emails, recordings, legal correspondence. My attorney has everything organized," I said. "I will need copies. This looks like targeted vandalism, possibly criminal mischief related to ongoing harassment. If we can establish a pattern, it strengthens the case," Detective Wilson said. I provided everything to the police that afternoon. David sent over relevant legal documents. The investigation began. Meanwhile, I had to repair my mixer. The damage was extensive enough that I needed to rent equipment while repairs were completed, costing me an additional $1,500 plus the repair bill itself. I documented every expense, every hour of lost work. 3 days into the police investigation, a neighbor 2 properties over from Susan's house contacted me. His name was Frank Morrison, a retired engineer who apparently paid attention to neighborhood activities. He had security cameras covering his driveway and part of the street. "I heard about what happened to your equipment. I checked my camera footage from that night. You are going to want to see this," Frank said when I arrived at his house. He pulled up the footage on his computer. The timestamp showed 2 in the morning on the night of the vandalism. The video clearly showed a figure approaching my property, staying in shadows but visible enough. The person wore dark clothing and a hood, but body shape and movement suggested a woman. Then, as the figure returned to the street after about 30 minutes, a street light caught her face for just a moment. It was Susan Carmichael. "Holy shit," I breathed. "I already called the detective handling your case. He is coming by this afternoon to collect the footage." "I thought you should see it first," Frank said. "Why do you have cameras covering the street?" I asked. "Had my car broken into last year. Installed a comprehensive system." "Lucky timing for you," Frank said. Detective Wilson arrived within 2 hours. Frank provided the footage on a USB drive and gave a statement. The detective's expression remained professional, but I could see the case solidifying in his mind. This is excellent evidence. Combined with the documented harassment pattern, we have grounds for criminal charges. "I will need to coordinate with the district attorney's office, but expect movement on this soon," Detective Wilson said. 4 days later, police arrested Susan Carmichael at her home. The charges included criminal damage, trespassing, and harassment. The arrest made local news because the story had all the elements people loved: HOA overreach, property disputes, and criminal escalation. Emma and I watched the news coverage that evening. The reporter stood outside Cedar Grove Estates, explaining how an HOA president's campaign against a neighboring business owner had resulted in criminal charges. They interviewed me briefly, keeping my comments focused on hoping for justice and being able to return to normal business operations. The legal process moved slowly, as these things do. Susan hired an attorney, pled not guilty initially, and tried to claim mistaken identity despite the video evidence. The district attorney, a sharp woman named Carol Chen, pursued the case methodically. The harassment documentation, the civil settlement Susan had violated, and Frank's video footage created an overwhelming case. I focused on repairing my equipment and rebuilding business momentum. Some clients who had hesitated during the conflict returned, reassured by the council meeting and news coverage that actually painted me sympathetically for once. My employees worked overtime helping catch up on delayed projects. The Cedar Grove HOA underwent significant changes. Patricia Morgan and other board members forced Susan to resign while awaiting trial. They installed new leadership committed to focusing on legitimate HOA responsibilities rather than feuds with neighbors. Patricia reached out to apologize personally and assure me the new board would not continue Susan's vendetta. Some of us should have stopped her earlier. We let her dominate the board because she was so forceful, and we assumed she knew what she was doing. We were wrong, and I am sorry you suffered because of our passivity, Patricia said during a phone call. I appreciate that. I never wanted conflict with your community. I just wanted to run my business in peace, I said. You deserve that. The new board is reviewing all our policies to prevent this kind of situation from happening again. We are also planning to commission a plaque acknowledging Richardson Concrete's role in building our community. It is the least we can do, Patricia said. That gesture touched me. My father had passed away 3 years earlier, and knowing his work would be recognized meant something. 6 months after her arrest, Susan Carmichael accepted a plea deal. She pled guilty to criminal damage and harassment charges. The sentence included probation, restitution for all damages and expenses I incurred, community service, and anger management counseling. She would not serve jail time, but the conviction meant she could never hold an HOA board position again, and the financial restitution totaled over $12,000. I attended the sentencing hearing. Susan looked diminished, her previous confidence replaced with embarrassment and resentment. When given the opportunity to address the court, she offered a perfunctory apology that rang hollow, but I did not need her genuine remorse. I needed the legal conclusion and the restitution to cover my losses. Judge Margaret Foster, a stern woman in her 60s, addressed Susan directly before finalizing the sentence. Miss Carmichael, you held a position of trust within your community. Instead of using that position responsibly, you engaged in a campaign of harassment against a legitimate business owner, culminating in criminal acts of vandalism. Your behavior demonstrates a troubling inability to accept boundaries and legal limitations on your authority. I hope you use this probationary period to reflect on the consequences of allowing personal grievances to escalate into criminal conduct, Judge Foster said. The gavel came down, finalizing everything. I walked out of the courthouse feeling truly free for the first time in almost a year. Emma planned a dinner that evening at our favorite restaurant, a Mexican place in downtown Phoenix, where we had celebrated our anniversary for 15 years. We sat on the patio, the desert evening cooling down, city lights beginning to glow as the sun set behind the mountains. It is finally over, Emma said, raising her margarita glass. I clinked my beer bottle against it. Finally, I can get back to just working without looking over my shoulder constantly. What are you going to do about that services agreement? You still technically have access rights to the entire development, she said with a slight smile. I laughed. Nothing. I am going to do absolutely nothing unless someone actually needs foundation inspection or repair. The point was never to harass them back. It was to establish that I had standing and they could not just push me around. Very mature of you, Emma teased. I have my moments, I replied. The restaurant filled with dinner crowds, the atmosphere festive and warm. I felt the tension I had carried for months finally releasing from my shoulders. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus asking about Monday's job schedule. Life was returning to normal routine, which felt like the greatest gift possible. The Cedar Grove HOA did commission that plaque, installing it near the development's main entrance 3 months after the sentencing. They held a small ceremony, inviting me and my employees. The plaque read, "Cedar Grove Estates acknowledges Richardson Concrete Company for their exceptional work in building the foundation of our community. Since 1962, 3 generations of the Richardson family have contributed to Phoenix's growth with integrity and excellence. We honor their craftsmanship and dedication." My mother attended the ceremony, crying as she read the words. My father would have been proud, but also would have made some joke about getting a plaque for just doing the job right. That was his way, never seeking recognition, but always delivering quality. Robert Hernandez showed up too, shaking my hand and reminiscing about working with my father. Several Cedar Grove residents approached to apologize for signing the original petition against me, explaining they had only heard Susan's version of events and felt terrible learning the full story. I accepted their apologies graciously. Most people are not malicious, just uninformed and trusting of authority figures who seem confident. Susan had weaponized that trust, but the community corrected course once they understood the reality. My business thrived in the following year. The publicity, while stressful during the conflict, actually raised my profile. People appreciated the story of a small family business standing up to HOA overreach. I hired 3 additional employees to handle increased demand. We purchased new equipment, expanding our capabilities. Emma and I bought a vacation home in Flagstaff, a small cabin in the pines where we could escape Phoenix heat and the memories of conflict. We spent weekends there, hiking and enjoying the quiet. The stress of the previous year faded into a story we could tell at dinner parties, dramatic and resolved. Susan Carmichael completed her probation and community service. I heard through Janet that Susan moved out of Cedar Grove Estates, unable to handle the social consequences of her actions. Her husband apparently was not thrilled about the restitution payments or the neighborhood infamy. They divorced shortly after she moved. I felt no satisfaction in her suffering, just relief that she was no longer a factor in my life. The new HOA board proved dramatically more reasonable. They focused on actual community needs like playground maintenance, street lighting, and social events, rather than trying to control areas beyond their jurisdiction. Patricia Morgan served as president for 2 years before passing the role to Mark Sullivan, who continued the reformed approach. I maintained my property and business without interference. The cement mixer ran every morning and no one complained. I waved to Cedar Grove residents when I saw them, and most waved back. The neighborhood normalized around my presence, accepting what should have been obvious from the start. A legitimate business operating on private property posed no actual threat to their quality of life. 3 years after the conflict ended, a foundation issue developed at one of the Cedar Grove homes. The homeowner, a young couple named James and Rachel Cooper, contacted me after their home inspector identified settling problems. I reviewed the property records, confirmed Richardson Concrete had poured that foundation in 2011, and agreed to inspect it. The problem turned out to be a plumbing leak that had undermined the soil beneath one corner of the slab. Nothing wrong with the original foundation work, but the leak needed repair and the foundation required stabilization. I provided the service at cost, not charging my normal rates because the homeowner had just purchased the property and was financially stretched. Thank you so much. Other contractors quoted twice this amount, Rachel said when I finished the work. Your home sits on a foundation my father supervised. I am not going to price gouge when you have a legitimate problem. Just remember Richardson Concrete if you need any other concrete work in the future, I said. Word spread about how I handled that job. More Cedar Grove residents contacted me for various projects: patio extensions, driveway repairs, decorative concrete work. The community that once tried to ban my mixer became a reliable source of business. The irony was not lost on me. I hired my nephew, Tommy, fresh out of technical college with a degree in construction management. He reminded me of myself at that age: eager, hardworking, willing to learn the details that separate adequate work from excellent work. Training him felt like honoring my father's legacy and ensuring Richardson Concrete continued into a fourth generation. Tommy asked about the conflict with Cedar Grove while we worked a job together one afternoon. I had not told him the full story, just vague references to neighbor disputes. I explained everything while we poured a foundation for a new garage, the mixer running steadily, concrete flowing smooth and consistent. So she really vandalized your equipment and got arrested? Tommy asked, incredulous. Really did. Some people cannot handle not getting their way. She thought being HOA president gave her authority over everything around her. When reality proved otherwise, she escalated instead of accepting boundaries, I said. What did you learn from all that? Tommy asked. I thought about it while finishing a section of the pour. Documentation matters. Legal rights mean nothing if you cannot prove them. Also, standing your ground is important, but choose your battles. I never wanted a war with the HOA. I just wanted to do my work. Everything else was self-defense. Tommy nodded, absorbing the lesson. We worked in companionable silence for a while, just the sound of the mixer and tools scraping concrete into place. That evening, driving home with equipment loaded in my truck, I passed the Cedar Grove Estates entrance. The plaque caught the late afternoon sun, bronze letters gleaming. I felt satisfaction seeing it, not because of recognition but because it represented resolution. Conflict transformed into acknowledgement, hostility replaced with respect, chaos settled into order. Emma was already home when I arrived, preparing dinner in the kitchen. The house smelled like garlic and herbs, something Italian probably. I washed the concrete dust off my hands and arms, changed out of work clothes, and joined her. "Good day," she asked, stirring something on the stove. "Good day." Taught Tommy about foundation drainage requirements. Simple job, but he learned a lot, I said. Susan Carmichael came into the emergency room today, Emma said casually. I looked up, surprised. Really? What happened? Car accident, nothing too serious. Broken arm, some bruising. She did not recognize me at first, then when she did, she looked mortified. I treated her professionally, of course. I am not going to compromise my medical ethics over old conflicts, Emma said. Did she say anything? I asked. She thanked me when I finished the cast. Then she said, "Tell Tyler I am sorry for everything. I know I said it in court, but I do not think I meant it then. I mean it now." Then she left. She looked sad. Tyler. Like life has been hard, Emma said. I processed that information. Part of me still felt anger remembering the stress and damage she caused. But another part, maybe the better part, felt something closer to pity. Susan had destroyed her own life far more effectively than she ever damaged mine. I had moved forward, thrived, built something stronger. She had lost her community, her marriage, her reputation. I hope she finds some peace, I said finally, meaning it. Emma smiled and kissed my cheek. You are a good man. We ate dinner on the back patio, watching the sun set over the desert. The evening air cooled, stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. My cement mixer sat in the garage, clean and maintained, ready for tomorrow's work. The equipment represented 3 generations of Richardson family labor, each generation adding to the legacy, building something that lasted. The Cedar Grove conflict had been brutal while it lasted, but surviving it taught me important lessons. I learned the value of preparation and documentation. I learned that legal rights matter only when enforced. I learned that institutions like HOAs derive power from assumption and intimidation, but crumble when confronted with actual legal boundaries. Most importantly, I learned that building something real, something useful, creates security that no petition or harassment campaign can destroy. My grandfather started Richardson Concrete with a truck, a mixer, and a reputation for honest work. 63 years later, that foundation remained solid. We poured concrete that held up buildings, supported communities, and created infrastructure people depended on daily. That work had meaning beyond profit, purpose beyond mere business. Susan Carmichael tried to ban my cement mixer, not knowing her entire development sat on my family's concrete. The irony was poetic, but the real lesson went deeper. You cannot build anything lasting on false authority and hostile intentions. Real foundations require honest work, quality materials, and respect for the ground beneath. My family understood that. Susan never did. The next morning, I fired up the mixer at 7. The familiar rumble filled the air, a sound that once triggered complaints but now represented normalcy. My crew arrived on time, loaded equipment, and we headed to a job site in Chandler. Another foundation to pour, another structure to support, another day of work that meant something. Tommy rode in the passenger seat, reviewing the project specifications. Big job today. Commercial foundation office complex. We need to be precise on this one. Every job requires precision. Size does not matter. Foundation work is foundation work. Do it right or do not do it at all, I said, echoing my father's words. We arrived at the site as the sun broke over the horizon, painting the desert in shades of gold and orange. The construction crew already had the forms set, rebar in place, everything prepared for the pour. I inspected their work, checking measurements and structural requirements. Everything looked good. The concrete flowed, filling the forms steadily. My crew worked with practiced efficiency, scraping and smoothing, ensuring proper distribution and eliminating air pockets. This foundation would support 4 stories of office space, thousands of people working above it daily. They would never think about the concrete beneath their feet, never consider the work that made their building possible. That was fine. Good foundations should be invisible, taken for granted, just there and reliable. By early afternoon, the pour was complete. We cleaned equipment, packed up, and headed back. Another successful job, another satisfied client, another small piece of Phoenix built on Richardson concrete. I drove past Cedar Grove Estates on the way home, glancing at the development that had caused so much trouble. It looked peaceful in the afternoon light. Homes with manicured lawns, children playing in yards, cars in driveways. A normal suburban neighborhood built on foundations my father poured, sitting on concrete my family provided. Susan Carmichael had tried to erase that connection, tried to pretend my business was some intrusive outsider rather than the literal foundation of her community. She failed because reality does not bend to HOA bylaws, and history does not disappear because it is inconvenient. I pulled into my driveway, parking the truck in its usual spot. The mixer sat in the garage, waiting for tomorrow. Emma's car was gone, still at the hospital finishing her shift. I walked around my property, checking on minor projects and maintenance items. This land had been in my family for 60 years, would hopefully remain for 60 more. The conflict with Cedar Grove taught me that protecting what you build requires vigilance, documentation, and willingness to fight when necessary. But it also taught me that after the fighting ends, life continues. Grudges become exhausting, conflict becomes boring, and eventually everyone just wants to move forward. I moved forward. Susan moved away. Cedar Grove adjusted and accepted. The story that felt overwhelming while living it became just another experience, another chapter, another thing that happened and then ended. That evening, Emma and I sat on the patio with cold drinks, enjoying the cooling desert air. We talked about mundane things, grocery shopping, weekend plans, whether to repaint the living room. Normal married conversation, comfortable and easy. You ever think about what would have happened if you had just moved the mixer to make Susan happy? Emma asked suddenly. I considered the question. Sometimes, it would have been easier in the short term, but it would have established that her authority extended to my property. Once you concede something you should not have to concede, the demands never stop. She would have found something else to complain about, some other way to exert control. Standing my ground was the only real option. Emma nodded. I know. I just hated seeing you stressed for so long. Me too. But it made me appreciate what I have now. Peace feels better when you remember what conflict felt like, I said. We sat in comfortable silence as the evening deepened. Somewhere in the distance, a cement mixer rumbled, probably one of my competitors working a late job. The sound felt like home, familiar and reassuring. My mixer would join that chorus tomorrow morning, continuing the work my grandfather started decades ago. The story of the HOA that tried to ban my cement mixer ended not with dramatic confrontation, but with quiet resolution. Life returned to normal, which was the goal all along. I won not by destroying Susan Carmichael or Cedar Grove estates, but by simply maintaining my right to exist and work on my own property. Sometimes victory looks like nothing more than the absence of conflict, the ability to wake up and go to work without harassment, the freedom to run your business without interference. That is what I fought for, and that is what I achieved. The cement mixer would fire up again tomorrow at 7. The HOA would not complain. Life would continue. And Richardson Concrete would keep pouring foundations that hold up communities for generations to come, just as we always have.